Beneath a quiet Pennsylvania town, an unstoppable inferno rages. Dive into Centralia's burning secret, tales of neglect, heroism, and nature's fury. Welcome to Damage Control's report on the town on fire. In the late 1800s, Centralia burst into life in the heart of Pennsylvania's coal country. Founded by mining activities, it quickly became a bustling community. Churches, schools, and coal mines painted a picture of the quintessential American dream, with miners and their families shaping its vibrant landscape. And for a while, life thrived in rhythm, with the hammering of the pickaxes and the chugging of the coal trains. But every rose has its thorn, as Centralia's prosperity was built on top of vast coal seams, a blessing that would soon become its curse. As the years rolled on, the coal mining industry saw its highs and lows, with Centralia weathering each storm. But in 1962, an ordinary landfill cleanup at the edge of town marked the beginning of the end of Centralia. To keep the landfill areas sanitary for an upcoming Memorial Day celebration, towns officials decided to set it ablaze, a common practice at the time. But the flames, instead of dying out, found their way into the labyrinth of abandoned coal mines beneath the town. What was thought to be a controlled burn evolved into a relentless subterranean inferno. The fire began to feed on the rich anthracite coal, and attempts to extinguish it proved futile. Initially, the gravity of the situation was underestimated. The town carried on, with residents somewhat aware but largely unconcerned about the fire beneath. But as weeks turned into months, and months into years, the ominous signs became harder to ignore. Sidewalks turned warm, basements filled with carbon monoxide, and at times, smoke would waft through the cracks, blanketing Centralia in a foreboding haze. The town's children, once playing freely in the streets and fields, began to encounter sudden and dangerous sinkholes, the ground beneath them giving way to the fire's eroding heat. Perhaps the most harrowing of these incidents was the near-tragic experience of a young boy, Todd Dombowski. On a seemingly ordinary day in 1981, Todd, a 12-year-old resident of Centralia, was playing in his grandmother's backyard when the earth beneath him gave way. He found himself plunging into a sinkhole, a chasm exhaling lethal carbon monoxide. The hole, which was about 4 feet wide and 150 feet deep, was directly connected to the fire below. Todd's quick-thinking cousin, who was nearby, reached out and held onto Todd's arms, preventing him from falling into the fiery abyss. Other Centralia residents also had unnerving encounters. Helen Womer spoke of her own chilling experience when she walked into her backyard one day. The ground beneath her feet felt strangely warm. She looked down to see the sole of her shoe melting from the heat. It was another ominous sign of the fire's relenting progression, indicating that its reach was expanding, and nowhere in Centralia was truly safe anymore. For the residents of Centralia, what began as whispers of worry soon escalated into clamoring concerns. Meetings were convened, experts were consulted, and debates raged.
They are well recognized as being potentially serious.
But as the fire continued its relentless advance, eating away at the very ground they called home, a grim reality began to set in. Centralia was burning from the inside out, and there seemed no end in sight. The burning coal released a mixture of gases, with carbon monoxide being the most dangerous. Residents began reporting a myriad of health issues. Tales such as headaches, dizziness, and shortness of breath became increasingly common. Several households reported their basements filling up with harmful gases, turning personal sanctuaries into potential death traps. One resident, Joan Jeromely, described waking up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, feeling as though an invisible hand was tightening around her throat. The prolonged exposure to these gases had a cumulative effect. Elderly residents and their children, with their more vulnerable respiratory systems, were particularly at risk. Long-term exposure led some to develop chronic respiratory problems, with cases of bronchitis and asthma spiking in the town. What compounded the residents' fears were the insidious and often invisible nature of these threats. Carbon monoxide, being odorless, was especially treacherous. Another significant concern was the presence of sulfur compounds. When coal burns, it releases sulfur dioxide, which can react with other elements in the atmosphere to form particulate matter. These tiny particles, when inhaled, can penetrate deep into the lungs. This not only exacerbates respiratory conditions, but can lead to further heart problems. Through personal testimonies woven into Fire Underground, an exhaustive book published on the tragedy of Centralia, a resident poignantly states, "We're not just losing our homes, we're losing our health." The overwhelming sentiment among Centralia's residents was one of feeling trapped, their health deteriorating, the value of their homes plummeting, and the silent enemy beneath their feet. Many faced a heart-wrenching decision to leave behind a place they loved or risk the very air they breathed. Centralia's descent into an inferno wasn't merely the rage of nature, it was a saga interspersed with human errors and bureaucratic missteps. By the 1970s, it was evident to many that the fire was no mere nuisance, but the bureaucratic machine moved at a pace that felt glacial to the concerns of the citizens. An early 1979 report had already indicated the increasing dangers, yet it seemed to be buried beneath layers of administrative protocol. And as the 1980s progressed, frustrations mounted. Allocated funds, which should have been channeled into firefighting efforts, were often caught in a quagmire of bureaucratic deliberation. One exasperated local leader mentioned at a town hall meeting, "Every dollar, every promise, it all gets lost in some office in Harrisburg or DC." And then, on a cold morning in January 1984, the grim news was officially relayed. In a press conference that still echoes the memories to many, a federal agency spokesperson announced, "Given the uncontrollable progression of fire and toxic dangers, we strongly advise the residents of Centralia to leave for their own safety." As the government was grappling with this unprecedented situation, the cost of extinguishing the fire far outweighed the economic value of the town. Relocation was not just the safest, but also the most economically viable solution. The initial offers of buyouts were met with mixed reactions. Some residents felt the sums were insufficient, hardly covering the costs of resettling and purchasing comparable homes elsewhere. Others were more amenable, recognizing the deteriorating situation and seeing buyouts as an opportunity for a fresh start. One poignant account mentions a family that had just finished paying off their mortgage, dreaming of a debt-free life, only to be faced with the prospects of starting over, with the government's offer falling short of their expectations. By the mid-1980s, the vast majority of Centralia's residents had accepted buyouts and left. A once thriving town has been reduced to a few holdouts, each with their deeply personal reasons for staying. But for many, Centralia would always remain home, regardless of where they're relocated, carrying with them the few memories of the town that once was. In the wake of a town largely vacated, with streets growing silent and houses standing vacant, a few souls chose to remain. Their reasons were diverse, a mosaic of emotional ties, defiance, and sheer determination. Centralia was not just a collection of houses and streets, it was a fabric of memories and shared histories. For some, it was where they took their first steps, celebrated milestones, and mourned losses. The thought of leaving was inconceivable, akin to abandoning a part of themselves. But emotional ties weren't the sole reason. Some of Centralia's residents displayed a kind of disbelief. They had witnessed the town's ebbs and flows, survived other challenges, and believed this too would pass. To them, leaving was an admission of defeat, a capitulation to the invisible enemy burning beneath. Individuals like John, an elderly resident who had lived his entire life in Centralia. His home was filled with mementos of yesteryears, each telling a story. When asked why he chose to stay, he simply remarked, "Where else would I go? This is home." Yet, staying in Centralia came with its challenges. The danger was palpable. The air they breathed carried the subtle undertones of the fire below. But for these residents, these were risks that they were willing to take. They adapted, marked out safe zones, avoided areas with visible smoke, and kept a watchful eye on any new signs of the fire's encroachment. The Centralia of today stands as an eerie testament to the power of nature and the consequences of human oversight. Once a vibrant town with thriving communities has now been transformed into a near ghost town, with the scars of the past still fresh on the surface. Streets that once saw daily traffic are now largely desolate, the asphalt broken in places where smoke continues to waft out, a reminder of the fire that still rages below. The structures that remain are largely dilapidated, their walls bearing the weight of memories and the relentless passage of time. Nature, too, has begun to reclaim its space, with greenery winding its way through the cracks and crevices, juxtaposing life amidst a backdrop of decay. However, Centralia is not entirely devoid of human presence. The town has seen a different kind of visitor, those drawn by curiosity or a desire to witness firsthand the aftermath of a disaster. Centralia has, in a sense, become an inadvertent tourist attraction. Visitors come equipped with cameras, capturing stark scenes, the plumes of smoke, and the occasional graffiti art that adorns the abandoned buildings. The calamity wasn't the result of a single misjudgment or solitary ill-fated event. Instead, it was the culmination of multiple factors, each exacerbating the other, leading the town down a path of irreversible ruin. Centralia's descent began with over a century of coal mining, carving out the intricate tunnels and shafts beneath the earth. These shafts inadvertently laid the foundation for disaster. Bootleg mining further complicated the landscape, introducing a myriad of uncharted passages into the coal seams. The council's decision to burn a garbage dump in an old coal strip mine pit was not a simple oversight but a grave miscalculation, born out of negligence and an underestimation of the latent dangers below. But as the narrative unfolds, it becomes increasingly evident that the largest shadows looming over Centralia's fate were ones cast by the very institutions meant to safeguard its citizens, the government. Initially, one could argue that the residents were reluctant to cooperate, turning down buyout offers, but investigations reveal a more troubling truth. The offers were not just inadequate, but insultingly low, a stark reflection of a bureaucratic system more concerned with ledger sheets than lives. The plight of Centralia's citizens was further compounded by political squabbles, as various state and federal agencies shirked responsibilities, each passing the buck, avoiding the financial burdens of rectifying the disaster. Such dereliction of duty left the town's residents entrapped in a toxic environment, with many yearning to escape but financially bound to their blighted homes. Centralia's story isn't just a cautionary tale about the dangers of environmental neglect or governmental bureaucracy. It's a poignant testament to the human cost of indifference and the perils of prioritizing short-term gains over long-term welfare. In the haunting silence of Centralia's empty streets and the ever-present plumes of smoke, we are reminded of the fragile balance between humanity, nature, and the structures we trust to protect us.